So firstly, my name is Charles McGregor. I'm a guru with saasguru, and I'm also a solution architect working in Australia for a product company who have a financial services product built on Salesforce. I've been working within the Salesforce industry for a number of years across a number of different areas, such as end user, also for product companies, and in consultancy for a few years as well. Tonight's session, we're going to do an introduction to flows, and more specifically, look at a use case related into screen flows. So firstly, saasguru and its platform helps you with a tailored solution to supercharge your learning, whether that is for your certified system administrator exam or even just going through the flow builder course in which I put together. It helps you gamify and see how your progress is going. It's a fantastic tool that I personally have used for one of my recent exams. And it's gamified as well. So you can see the different study groups, you can see different challenges that you have and see how your course progress is going. There's also a Slack community as well, in which you can ask others for help. You can collaborate with others as well. And you can also ask people like myself and other gurus within saasguru of help with different topics or different challenges you may be having through your trailheads or through your study. So how saasguru bridges the gap between your learning and your certification is it helps supercharge what you have within Trailhead and doing your trailheads with additional functionality and additional learning modules in which to assist you better understand the different concepts within Salesforce. As everyone knows, there's so many different facets of Salesforce, and understanding it all can be quite daunting. So what saasguru does is helps understand and helps push you forward in your learning by giving you easy to understand concepts with videos, diagrams, and the key concepts in which you need to understand. This, coupled with your other learnings through Trailhead, assist you with getting your different Salesforce certifications, whether that be the administrator or developer or one of the other certifications. So you can become part of the community, very easy. We'll provide a link to the Slack community in the chat within this meeting. We also have a LinkedIn community as well, so please feel free to join that. By joining the community as well, we have the ability to provide certification vouchers, provide product tips and updates. We run more webinars just like this. We have another one tomorrow. And also you can get help from a number of gurus all around the world who have different specialities, just like myself. We have our Slack community here, which you can see we have the different channels here where we can book mentors, you can ask for help, or you can just see the general channel that we have here as well. Different people asking for different help here, and you can use this to ask your questions and ask through the team as well. Now on the saasguru portal, we have here the Certified Administrator Exam Prep. Now over here, some of the concepts we'll be going through are within the study plan. But if I click over on my 9 dots here, I can go over to the Flow Skills course. Now, if any of you don't have the Flow Skills course or have signed up for it yet, please do. It's a free course. I spent a lot of time putting it together and would love to hear your feedback on it. Mine's deciding to be a little difficult for me. So there we go. Jump over here. Click here. Go. So I can see the Flow Skills course here. If I go over to my study plan, I can see the different topics and the different stages in which we have created, where we have a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced, as well as having practice tests for you to go through on the different concepts in which you've followed in the videos. In each of these, they have different information in there and videos which I've put together to help you understand the different concepts. Let's jump in flows. So firstly, what are flows? So Salesforce flows are a low-code automation tool of choice. With the announcement of workflows and process builders being phased out, and even in the next release, no new workflow rules will be able to be created. Salesforce flows is becoming even more powerful. It's come leaps and bounds over the years with an updated user interface and so much more functionality available. It also makes it a lot easier for administrators who don't have the access to developers to actually create very user-friendly and quick user processes without depending on development resources. You don't have to worry about code coverage with deployment of code. Within there has been the introduction of test cases for different record triggered flows, which we'll go through in another course. But overall, Salesforce flows are becoming more and more attractive for everyone. You can create screen wizards, which we'll go through today. You can create, update, and delete records. We can run SQL queries, process batches through scheduled flows, and we can even complete actions based on platform events that are received by your environment. So Salesforce flows is an integral part for any administrator or developer, or really anyone within the Salesforce ecosystem, to better understand how they can assist with the deployment and assistance with your requirements. There'll be a number of concepts from which I'll go through, not just in this session, but other sessions which you'll hear mentioned. And this just gives a general rundown on some of those. So firstly, the flow builder. So the flow builder is essentially where we create the flow. So it's a user-friendly interface with drag and drop functionality. You use it to create your paths for your different flows, irrelevant of the type of flow in which you're doing. The flow version is a version of your flow. For anyone familiar with Process Builder, it's the exact same concept. You have different versions. Now, every version, you can go back and activate a previous version. Now, you can only have a certain number of flow versions under one flow. At that point, you would need to create a brand new flow with a new name, a new API name, or delete old versions of a flow. Now, the flow interview is the running instance of the flow. So when you're running a flow that asks for inputs through a link, a button, or a tab, that is a flow interview. It can be paused, we can resume it at a later time, and it can be deleted as well. What you'll find is you cannot delete a flow version if it has active running flow interviews. Then we have flow actions. So an action that the flow can execute, such as reading or writing Salesforce data, displaying information, and collecting inputs from users. You also have the flow connectors, which connect the different elements within your flow. With a new feature that came out quite recently within flows, you now have the auto layout. So you have two different types of flow layouts you can have. One where you decide where all of the elements sit on your flow builder, or it's automatically laid out. And you have flow resources. So they represent a value you can reference in a flow, such as a variable, a constant, a pick list choice, formulas, any of these, and which we'll go through in more detail. Now, a product showcase tonight, and what we'll be going through is essentially a screen flow. We'll touch on many different features, which I'll talk through as we go through the flow. And the use case tonight is that ABC containers want the ability for users to streamline the opportunity creation process, as well as allowing users to create a quote if they require. The flow should do the following. It should create a basic opportunity. It should allow for the adding of opportunity products. It should allow for the user to create a quote if required, and allow the user to add in opportunity products as quote lines as required. Now, these are obviously things that can be done within Salesforce quite easily, but what we're going to aim to do here is streamline that process to make it as efficient as possible for users. Now, what I'll be running through within the ScreenFlow, there are definitely elements of it that could be further enhanced using different pieces of code, such as different components. But what we're looking at tonight is just a look from an administrator in the capability of a flow just from a system administrator's perspective. Now, I've created this one ahead of time because there's a number of elements and I didn't want to spend so much time on me creating these elements and more concentrate on walking you through the capabilities and how to create these sorts of screen flows. So here I have my opportunity screen flow. By clicking the view details and versions, I can actually see the details of the flow. So here we can have the opportunity screen flow. I can see what the active version is. So you can see that I've had 2 previous versions of my flow, and this is the current active flow. I can see my API name, the URL for it, when it was last activated, and when I created it. Now here, I can click open, and we'll see over here, just close this one down, we have my flow. Here, this is our flow builder screen. So we're going to talk through each of these elements so everyone understands what we're looking at. So firstly, at the top here, we have the name of our flow. Over on the right-hand side here, we have a help function, which can take us into Trailhead. Then we go down here, where we can select elements, which hides our area here. We have our undo and redo buttons, which if I were to go and make a change, would obviously change that. And we have our properties. Within our properties, we have our flow label and our API name. Now, we can't change our API name after we've saved it. If we wanted to change the API name, we would have to save a new version of our flow. Sorry, a complete new flow instead of a new version. Now, under here, under Show Advanced, we have a number of other areas in here, a number of different variables. So firstly, how to run the flow. Now, if we were not to select anything in here, it means that the flow would run as the person who is running that flow. What that means is any sharing and security linked to that person's profile would be respected. Now, if I change this to be system context without sharing and the ability to access all data, that means that they can see everything and do everything, which can be really good when you have a restricted environment where your flow is going to collect information from, say, your price books or from accounts where users may not necessarily have access into. However, maybe you want to ensure that that is enforced. So here we can enforce that to ensure that it's run in that context. This can potentially cause issues dependent on the type of flow in which you're running, but can also make sure that they can only see records that they should be seeing. We can also choose a template. So if I had a template for this flow, I could see that in here. And I can also mark this as a flow, as a template. Then we can link it to a original flow and the API version of which it's running on. This will default to the most recent API version. We can also see our interview label here, which is, if we were to have a look at our interview labels, our flow interviews, this is what we would see there. So we can customize that. We can also see other system information down here, such as the last modified, the status, the type, and the version number. Over on the right-hand side here, we have our auto layout. So this is what I was talking about before, where we have a freeform, where if I use freeform, I can move these around to wherever I want them to be. I can also click the back button here. So we have a slightly different user interface. Whereas under the auto layout, it automatically selects those for me. I also have the run, debug, deactivate, and save as. So run would run this particular flow. Debug would give me the ability to debug this flow and see the values in which are committed at every step. I can then save as. You'll notice I can't deactivate it because I have moved things around here. It has made sure that I can only create a new version of this flow. So now let's get into the flow. So firstly, this is a flow where we're wanting to create an opportunity. So we keep that at the top of our minds. So here we have a screen component. Now to add in a screen component or to add any element in, we click the plus here, and then we're given different options. So firstly, we would use a screen element, which is what I've done here. Now I've made this quite simple here. I don't want to clog it up with fields. We need to keep in mind that our requirement is to streamline the process. We want to make this as painless as humanly possible for the end user. With our configure of header and footer, I can hide different buttons here. I can hide, we want our next and finish button, but say, for example, I don't want the previous button, I don't want the pause button. I can hide those there. If I also didn't want to see this header here, I can hide it as well. So then it cleans up our user interface here. Now, what I have done here is I've included a section. And what a section allows you to do is to create more columns. So it allows you to use the most of your real estate to provide more information in a smaller area. So here, I'm just going to go back here. And within this particular section at the top, which I've split into two, I have two lookup fields. Now, a lookup field just works like any other lookup. Firstly, we need to always define an API name. Now, this is the API name for this field within your flow. Then I'm using the field API name, which is the API name of the lookup field in which I'm referencing. Then I have my object API name here, which is opportunity. I've also given it a label, so that's obviously what would show up here. So if I change this, we can see that will change there. Select an account. Now I can choose this to be required or not. And additionally down here, I can choose when this value is seen. So I can control whether it is visible or hidden. So for example, if I wanted to say that the price book field here should only be shown when a person wants to add opportunity products. What I could actually do here is I could set my component visibility, could go in here and say opportunity products. And then what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a screen component because that's what each of these are. Each of these on the side here are screen components. So here, I'm going to grab my create opportunity items, which is this field here, go in here and I'm going to select the value. And the value is whether it's no or yes. If I put in yes here, I want this one here, and I can click done. And what that means is that field, and I can see because I have a little I here, that that field price book will only show up when this is equal to yes. And these toggles here are really great. They're a personal favorite of mine because we can have multiple on there and they're just little toggles. They're better than using checkboxes, in my opinion, because it gives the ability for them just to go, yes, that's what I want. Now we have a number of other fields here. So we have our address fields, which, as address fields are within Salesforce, we can have that information there and can be populated. We can set the values as well on the other side by assigning them within our advanced area. Now with Salesforce coming out in the new release that we'll be able to create custom address fields, I can see this getting a lot of use. We also have checkboxes and checkbox groups. We have currency fields, date and date time fields, and dependent pick lists, display images, and emails. File upload is a fantastic one as well, where you can allow for users to upload files, and we can allow for the upload of multiple files. What we need to be sure of when using the file upload component is always make sure that you have a related record ID. The importance of that is so that the file is related back to the object in which you want. You can also define the uploaded file names as well. Then we go into our long text area fields, our lookup fields, multi-select pick lists, name, number, and we also have password fields here. So our password fields, as you can expect, they can be set in here, and those values can be assigned into your different objects. Our phone fields, pick lists, and radio buttons. We also have sliders as well. So a slider component allows for a selection between two values. And text, toggle, and URL. Down here, we also have a display text. And this is great, and I've used one in a later screen where you can just type in text here, which is great for fault messages, which is a key thing to have within your screen flows, and also allows for messages such as your record has been created. And there's also a custom component here, which is a stages field. Now, this is similar to the opportunity stages in which are shown on an opportunity. So if I were to go over here, just grabbing an opportunity within this environment, it would show up similar to this, where you can define the different values up here. Jumping back onto our screen flow, I'm just going to cancel out of here. So here, within this screen, we're selecting our account and our primary contact. We're selecting our price book, and we're just asking the user whether they want to add opportunity products and if they want to create a quote. Then what we're doing is we're getting the account which was shown within the lookup field or selected within our lookup field. Within this, we're using a filter. So the account ID is equal to the account ID that was listed in the lookup. We're not sorting because we're only grabbing one record, and we're going to automatically store all the fields. Our other options here, obviously to store all records, if you wanted to create a collection of records, which we do use. We can choose fields and let Salesforce do the rest, so we can store only certain values. And we can choose fields and assign those variables to different different values. So we can store them in a record variable specifically or into separate variables. This can be helpful for you if you want to use them in different complex ways. The easiest to use is to use the automatically store all fields. We've done the same thing with our contact get, which is using the primary contact and getting the record ID. And we're only storing one record because only one record is going to be returned. Then we're creating our opportunity. The reason why we want to create our opportunity early on is we're going to be using it to relate our opportunity products and our quote unquote line items. So our create opportunity, we've kept very simple here. So we're only creating one record. So if I just open up a separate one, just to show you what it looks like when you first open it up. So if I go in here and type in opportunity, so we can use all the values assigned from a record. So if you had a variable, a record variable in which you were using, you could grab the values from that record variable and just easily create your record. Now, because in this instance, we haven't assigned those values into an opportunity record variable, we're going to use separate resources and literal values. Then all we need to do is select our object and select the fields in which we want to map to. Jumping back over to the one I've created, we can see here that I'm using the record ID from our lookup. For the close date, I'm using the close date value, which I've made from a formula, which I'll go through in a second. The currency ISO code I have hard-coded into AUD. The name I've created a formula for. The primary contact, I'm just using the primary contact record ID, and I'm setting this as a qualification. So if I go over here into our formulas, I've used a global variable, which is within our resources. We have our assignments, collection choice sets and variables, our creation nodes, decision outcomes, decisions, formulas, and variables. Finally finished off by our screen components. Down the very bottom here, we have global variables. Now, these are values in which you can use throughout your flow. In this particular instance, I'm using a flow global variable and grabbing the current date. Another really important one in here is our fault message. Now, why would you want a fault message? So a fault message is really handy when you're creating records and doing operations within your flow to put in a fault message. So if an error occurs, the user can see what that error was, because there's nothing worse than getting an unhandled fault has occurred. Please contact your system administrator. It doesn't provide any context to the end user as to why that has happened. So the inclusion of a fault message is really important. In here for our close date, I'm using the current date and then I'm plussing 14 days. For our opportunity name, I'm using the name from our get account here, and I'm adding a dash and then entering in the get contact last name and then adding opportunity at the end. Something nice and simple. Then I come to our first decision. Now, a decision element allows us to choose different outcomes based on criteria. Here, I'm checking if the create opportunity items value, so that's our toggle in our first screen, is equal to true, so equal to yes. Then my default outcome is just if none of our outcomes come back with a true value, then execute the default. In this particular scenario, I just have two options. It's either yes or it's no. For yes, what I'm then doing is I am going through and I'm getting our price book entries. Now, why I need our price book entries is I need the values in which are linked to the items within the price book that I've defined within my first screen. Here, I'm collecting all the records. I don't just want one, I want all of them. This means that I'll be given a complete list of the different values in which I have within that price book. And I'm going to automatically store all the fields, because I want to make sure that if there's one field in there that I need, it's already been stored. Then we go into our opportunity product selection. Now here, there are different ways in which this could be done. Now, this is the way in which could be done from an administrator perspective, but could definitely be improved and enhanced with the help of a developer in creating a Lightning Web component to surface in here with all the different selections and the quantities. But here, what I have done is I've created a pick list, and my choices are my opportunity items. So what this is this is the items in which have been provided to me in the get function in the element before. I'm also defining what the quantity of the item is. So if I want 1, if I want 6, if I want 20. And I'm also using another toggle here saying, do you want to add another product? What this will then do is it will go through this whole loop and it will check here in our next decision element whether that toggle is yes. If there are more products, it will go back to the start here and will continue through this until it's selected as no. Now, this particular process here, we're using firstly a collection filter. So what we are doing here is we are filtering the collection, which is our price book entries from our get price book entries. We're using the ID that's been selected in our screen and selecting which product to add. That then is stored within a collection variable, and then we use a loop element. Now, a loop element allows you to go over a collection of records one by one. This is really helpful for when you're creating multiple records or you're wanting to make updates to a number of different records within that collection, or complete different decision elements. Now, one thing to note with a loop element, you should never complete a database action from within a loop. What I mean by that is you shouldn't be doing a get, a create, an update, or a delete within a loop. The reason being is that you will, within the loop, it will run that get every single time it goes through. So, for those of you that are familiar with the DML limits and the different limits that are enforced by Salesforce, this has the potential to cause issues, because if you have a get element up here, each one of these is using part of your limits. Then if you are to do say an update from within here, that's going to use up one call every single time. It's important that any of your gets, your updates, and your creates are all done outside of loops and are done in collections. So here, what we are doing is we're using this loop to go in and create an opportunity line item. Now, to use a loop in this way, we need two things. We need an opportunity, we need a single variable. And what a single variable is it is a record variable, which is for a particular object. So it's essentially a blank record. It has no values whatsoever. We need one of those to individually set the values for each of the fields. What we also need is we need allow multiple values as well. We need a collection, because what we're going to do is we are going to grab the values from the single variable and we are going to populate them into that collection. So then we're going to have all of our records together in one collection. Then at the very end, we're going to create our opportunity line items. And this one's great because we're creating multiple. We can just grab that opportunity line item collection and create all the records right there and then. We don't have to do them individually. We can just use our collection. And then what we do next is we have another decision element down here, which is looking back to our first screen, which says, do they want to create a quote? Yes or no? If yes, it goes ahead and it creates a quote. And the quote is great because there are only 3 fields in which you need on a quote. You actually only need 2, but we've put in the contact ID as well. So we need a name for our quote and we need the opportunity which the quote is related to. I've created another quote name formula. So just like the other formulas that we have the opportunity name, and then we've just thrown quote 1 on the end. Then I've done another decision element in here to check if we created opportunity line items before. The reason being is we can't create any quote line items that match those within the opportunity line item without actually having the values exist. We need that information. So this checks if it's null. If it's null, then it's going to do the default outcome and just create a quote. If there are values in there, it is going to use those to create the quote line items. Then we can see us go through another another loop here. We can see that I'm using the opportunity line item collection. And this is quite a few fields in here. So we have our price book and our product, and quantity, quote, total price, sales price, list price, and the currency. What I like to do is when I'm working on an object that I'm not that familiar with, or say I'm doing a new flow on on a new object, I will actually have the object open on another screen, and I will go through the typical way of creating a standard record on that page to make sure that I'm capturing all the information that I need. So trying to do this only once. Now, once I've set these values within this single variable, I use the next assignment element. So we have 2 assignment elements here. One to assign values to the single variable, and then another one to assign the values from the single variable into the collection. Then we go back and we loop through each of them. Then at the very bottom here, we create all of our quote line items in the collection. Then at the end, just to show that it's all worked, we have a little opportunity created screen here. Now, one thing we can do as well is we can put a link into the new opportunity, which we will do in a further session, and look at how we can improve this flow by a record triggered flow to send a custom notification out to the user to say it's been created and they have to work on on the proposal for the quote, or create tasks. We'll also send an outbound message And we'll also use it to look at a platform event coming back through. But we'll save those items for another night. And tonight, what we'll do is look at this. But this is what we're going to use as our base. There's quite a few elements here, but overall, it makes sense when you go through it element by element. In sort of cases like this as well, you can look at implementing subflows, which is another flow that say it could be doing this collection for you. It could be doing the creation of records, or even the creation of these collections for you to then create the records. It's sometimes good to set those up so you have one flow that rules them all and subflows that are called on throughout the process. Now, we've completed our flow, we're happy with it, meets all of our requirements. Next, what we want to do is we want to debug it. Now, debugging is really important because this means that you're having a look at your flow and debugging to make sure that any issues that come up, you can pick up within this. So here, we're running the latest version of the flow. We're showing what's executed and rendered flow and render the flow in Lightning runtime. We'll see all the information on the right here. And if we had process automation settings set up to allow us to run flows as other users, we'd have the ability to tick this and select that user, which is really helpful when you're checking if they actually have access to run this flow. So I click run here, and we can see this is how it started. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to pick Dickinson PLC. I'm going to use Salesforce test user. I'm going to use my special price book. And we're going to add our opportunity products and create a quote. Now we're going to click next. So now you'll notice a number of things have popped up on the right-hand side here. So we can see the screen component here, and it's showing the values in which have been selected. Then we can see that it's gone and retrieved the account, retrieved the contact, and it's created our opportunity. Then it's checked if we wanted to select opportunity line items. It's seen that we did, so it's retrieved our price book entries from our special price book, and now we're at this screen. So here I can see that I have my 4 products. So I'm going to click the SLA Platinum here and click 1, and I'm going to check this on. Now you'll notice I've come back to the screen, but on the right-hand side here, I can see that I have assigned these values here, and it's been assigned to the collection. It's checked the decision, and it's popped back here. So now I'm going to pick the Gen Watt diesel, I'm going to select 2, and I'm going to leave this as no. I'm going to click next, and I'm brought to the finals page, which confirms that our opportunity has been created. Here, I can see that it's gone through all of these steps, such as creating the quote line items, assigning the values. And this is really helpful if I want to go in and go, okay, well, for example, the list price is null. Why is that? And I can go through and have a look at it and find out why. Now, screen flows actually do commit the data to the database. So I can see here that the one that I just ran in my debug log has created the records, it's created my quote, and I can see all of the information here. But if we look at it from a user perspective, so I've activated this flow, and what I've done is I've included it in a button. Now I've removed the new button, so users can't actually create a new opportunity through the standard Salesforce way. I haven't needed to overwrite that button. I've been able to create it within a list button where I can click here, and I'm brought into my screen flow. Here, I'm going to use Blues Entertainment Group, use Steve Platform. I'm going to grab my special price book and I'm going to create both of these as well. So this is from a user perspective. This is what they would actually see. I click next here. I'm going to select my products. I'm going to throw all 4 in. And there we go. I can see here that my opportunity has been created. Now, what we actually could do is look at setting this finish to redirecting us to our new opportunity. So I can see here that I now have my Blues Entertainment Group opportunity here. I have all my products and I have my quote with all the quote line items here. So if we actually look at this from a user perspective, instead of them having to create multiple different products in multiple different screens, we've been able to streamline the process of creating an opportunity, adding in products, and creating a quote with those products into essentially 2 screens and 6 fields. So that process is just showing how quick and how user-friendly flows are. And to put a flow such as this together, it's not a lot of work. All it takes is just your familiarity of playing around with these, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and figuring out how to best meet your requirements. I'm always here to have chats about flows. I love talking about them. I'm happy to jump on calls within the Slack channel, and we'll be setting up a channel just to talk about flows in the flow course as well. So please feel free to jump in there and ask any questions that you have. Now that's all I wanted to go over tonight. There's obviously a lot there. In our next sessions, what we'll look at doing is building onto this flow, like I said, with record triggered flows, also looking at platform events, and also how we can leverage and make this flow even better. If there's any suggestions on particular use cases in which you're experiencing or that you've come up against, I'd be happy to look at including those in one of the future sessions as well, to help understand your situations and help with your learning.